Oil rigs are dangerous places to work, enormous structures miles from land, where if something goes wrong, the results can be catastrophic. This is shown by incidents such as the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig explosion in April 2010, which killed 11 people. However, as well as the risk of explosions, there are hazards everywhere. Offshore workers risk their lives to complete dangerous tasks, often at height, to ensure the smooth running of operations. Safety should be paramount within these environments, otherwise people lose their lives. However, in October 2000, an incident would lay bare the utter lack of safety procedures and maintenance of basic equipment which existed on the Magellan rig in the North Sea, and this would result in the truly horrific death of a man called Gordon Moffat. Welcome to Tales of Tragedy. For today's tale, we go back to the year 2000 and travel to the North Sea, and specifically the Magellan oil rig, which, at this time, was located 120 miles east of Aberdeen in Scotland. It's been operating in this stretch of water since 1992. At the relevant time, it was operated by Santa Fe Drilling Company Limited. On board the rig in October 2000 was a man called Gordon Moffat, aged 41. I've been unable to find pictures of Gordon, but it's been reported that he was from the town of Buckhaven on the east coast of Fife in Scotland, and that he was married to a woman called Janice and had 2 children. At the time of his death, he'd been on the rig for 2 weeks and worked as an assistant derrickman as part of sea crew. A derrickman is a worker whose main responsibility is to ensure the integrity of the drilling rig and its functions. Their role is one of the most physically demanding on the rig, and can often result in them having to work suspended from great heights above the rig, or sometimes working underneath it, dangling above the swelling sea, knowing that one false move would mean certain death. However, there were serious failings on the rig, which would have fatal consequences for Gordon, and mean that he would never return home to his family. The main issues related to this tale include the fact that the radios used by the workers to communicate with each other were often not fully charged or faulty. In fact, it emerged after the incident itself that there was no company policy on the issue or use of radios. There was no obligation to regularly check these essential communication devices or maintain them, and it was known that they were not 100% reliable. In addition, there was an emergency tannoy system which had a built-in delay. Lastly, most of the crew had no formal training in risk assessments or emergency contingency planning. Paperwork giving them instructions on these vital areas were attached to the walls, but no one had bothered to read them. This combination of factors would lead to Gordon Moffat suffering a horrific death, which is one of the worst I've ever heard about. Around 11:30 p.m. on Monday the 9th of October 2000, the 8 members of sea crew, including Gordon Moffat, assembled for a pre-shift meeting to discuss the tasks which needed to be performed. One of these was the attachment of hydraulic hoses to the casing of part of the drilling apparatus below the rig floor. The purpose of this meeting was not only to discuss the task, but work out how it could be achieved safely. In order to do this, they should have undertaken a risk assessment and ensured that all contingencies were covered. This didn't happen. Gordon was assigned this task, and it occurred in several stages. The drilling apparatus was inaccessible from the rig floor, and so he took an elevator down to a lower level, known as the blowout preventer or BOP deck, with another worker, known as a banksman. Workers on the rig floor fed a winch cable with a harness through a 10-inch wide hole called a mouse hole on the rig floor down to the BOP deck, and Gordon put it on and was pulled into the air. The winch was operated by a worker sat in a compartment on the rig floor, so we couldn't actually see Gordon, who was dangling hundreds of feet below, out of sight. In order to tell the winch operator what to do, Gordon would give hand signals to the banksman, who, using his radio, would call in the instructions to the winch operator. It seems that Gordon should have had a radio, but he didn't. Why is unclear. As the winch operator could not see Gordon, he was completely reliant on the radio calls from the banksman. Initially, things went smoothly. Gordon began his task and moved up and down the drilling apparatus he was working on. He would give the relevant hand signal to ascend or descend, and the banksman on the BOP platform, looking up, would radio these to the winch operator. He would then give the signal to stop when he was in position, and again this was relayed. At one point, Gordon gave the hand signal to ascend. This was called in by the banksman. Gordon then gave the signal to stop, and this was again conveyed. However, Gordon didn't stop ascending. The banksman again called for the winch operator to stop, but nothing happened. The radio had failed. Whether this was the battery or some other fault is unclear, but regardless, the result was the same. Gordon Moffat was being pulled upwards at the rate of 11 inches per second towards the mouse hole, which was just 10 inches in diameter. By this point, Gordon and the banksman were screaming stop at the top of their lungs, but it was to no avail. Gordon was being pulled closer and closer to the 10-inch hole, and he lay horizontally in his harness to buy himself any time to avoid being pulled into the hole. No doubt he was hoping and praying that any second the winch would cut out. The banksman ran to an emergency tannoy system around 40 feet away from his position and shouted, quote, "All stop on the white tugger." There was a delay of a few seconds before this message was blasted out, and finally the winch stopped. However, it was too late for Gordon Moffat. He had been pulled via the waist into the 10-inch hole, which had killed him. A description of what happened to him reads, quote, "The midsection of the body of Mr. Moffat was subject to massive disruption of the tissues and structures of the lower abdominal area, amounting to virtual transection. In essence, Gordon Moffat was pulled into the hole, which resulted in him being crushed and his body being ripped open at the waist, almost splitting him in two." Gordon Moffat was laid to rest in his hometown of Fife in Scotland. An inquest was held into his death, which began in November 2001 at Aberdeen Sheriff Court. The full report was not published until 2003. Within it were the serious failings I've already pointed out. Front and centre was the issue with the radios. Had there been proper communication, then this tragedy could have been avoided. In addition, due to a lack of training in risk assessment and mitigation, no one had been stationed standing over the mouse hole looking down on Gordon. If someone had been there, then they would have heard his shouts and screams, and they would have communicated this to the winch operator by hand signals or on the radio. Also, the delay in the tannoy system cost precious seconds. However, it was not clear whether this made a difference to the outcome. Santa Fe Drilling Company admitted failing to ensure proper risk assessment and hazard identification and issued an apology. They also claimed they'd made relevant changes to ensure that something like this didn't happen again in the future. Gordon Moffat's family were given an out-of-court financial settlement, and the company itself was fined £60,000. This sum is offensive and truly disgusting when I tell you that Santa Fe's net income for 2001 was around £265 million. That's akin to you or I being asked to pay pennies. That is apparently the price a multi-million-pound company pays for negligence, resulting in the horrific death of one of their workers. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, feel free to check out my second channel called Evil Among Us, which focuses on true crime. I'll put a link in the description. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.